I must admit that the day's reflection is going to be a little challenging. So let's do it together. Recently, I've been reading in the papers and actually watching television stories that have really made me stop and think, reflect, if you will. These have all been stories that have had a common theme. Here's that theme. A man or a woman makes a decision that turns out to be destructive to their careers, to their families, and their lives in general. Standing at a great distance, we can all read and hear about those stories, and we think things like, that guy's gotta be stupid. How can he throw away everything he had? Or why in the world would anybody in their right mind? Well, I've been giving some thought to that as I've watched some of these reports. It's so easy to criticize and make judgments from the distance and in hindsight. Guys, the truth is all of us make bad decisions. Am I not right? I mean, it's so easy to criticize people that we don't know except by reputation or from a distance. Yet the truth is everybody makes bad decisions. You do, and I do. And fortunately, not all of our bad decisions make the newspaper or the evening news. Thank God for that, right? Not everybody even cares about all the decisions that we make because we're not in the public eye as much as some other people. Yet even public figures make bad decisions. So the question becomes, why? There's a word that really came to my mind as I thought about this. It doesn't matter how big or how bad the decisions are. It seems that many of our poor decisions are because of this one word. That word is appetites. We make decisions to do things because we have an appetite that wants and even demands to be fed. Let me explain what I mean. I looked up the word appetite again today. The dictionary defines appetite as a natural desire to satisfy bodily needs, especially for food or sexual activity. They call it an inclination or a desire. There you have it. You make bad decisions because we have these inner desires and inclinations or hungers, and we just want to feed them. We don't want to deny our appetites. One of the worst things to happen to any of us is for us to be uncomfortable, right? So we feed our desires. We want to satisfy them. Some of our appetites have become so strong that they can literally lead us to make decisions that are harmful and destructive to every other area of our life. The Bible has a word that's applicable here. It's the word lust. Lust is when an appetite or a desire is out of control. Lust is unbridled appetites. We eat until it becomes self-destructive. We allow our sexual appetites to override our common sense. We let our desire or appetite for power or possessions or even attention manipulate us into making inappropriate decisions. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, the first part of chapter 6, verse 7, all man's appetites are for his mouth. Wow, what a verse. We live to please our desires. We have what the Bible calls a carnal nature, or a sinful or a fleshly nature. That simply means that we're controlled by our appetites, our physical appetites. The problem is that this nature or these appetites can never be satisfied. At the end of verse 7 in Ecclesiastes 6, Solomon says, yet his appetite is never satisfied. Our flesh, our nature, our appetites will always crave for more. The more we feed it, the more it wants. And so it becomes a vicious cycle. And it screams to be fed. We feed it to silence it or to satisfy that desire. Yet feeding that desire only makes it crave to be fed more. Living to simply satisfy those cravings is dangerous. Paul said it like this in Philippians 3:19. They are headed for destruction. Their God is their appetite. They brag about shameful things and they think only about this life here on earth. When our appetite is our God, we're headed for destruction. That's why people make dumb decisions. They're living to feed that fleshly, carnal, or self-centered appetite. Appetites have to be controlled. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 6, first part of verse 9, better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. The New Living Translation expands on that and says in the whole verse, enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. Just dreaming about nice things is meaningless, like chasing the wind. He's saying we need to learn to enjoy the life we have and to keep those desires under the control. That's the mandate God gives us. And God says this to protect us, not to restrict us. Here's a great admonition for all of us found in Romans 8, verses 12 through 13. So letting your sinful nature control your mind leads to death. But letting the Spirit control your mind leads to life and peace. That's verse 6. Then he goes on to say in verse 12 through 13, you have no obligation to do what your sinful nature urges you to do. It's another word for it, urges. For if you live by its dictates, your desires, your urges, your inclinations, you'll die. But if through the power of the Spirit you put to death the deeds of your sinful nature, you will live. Guys, we don't have to be dominated by our appetites. God has given us the ability and the strength to keep our appetites under control. Now, I admit, this is a strong word for us today. And I've got to confess that way too often I let my desires and my appetites control me instead of me keeping them in check and in balance. That's why this is written today, so I could have a talk with myself. But we need to stop and think about this a little bit before they take control of us. So let me ask you, what appetites do you have that need to be suppressed? What desires do you have that tend to want to dominate and control your life? Just come clean. Go ahead and just admit it to God. He knows it anyway. Tell God what those urges are. Tell him what the tendencies are that pull at you. Those tendencies without his power that you are powerless to overcome. And then ask God to give you the strength to bring them under his control. Controlled appetites are good. They lead us to achieve and to do great things. I'm not talking about a total life of self-denial of all appetites. We're talking about controlling and disciplining our appetites. It's us seeking God to ask God to help us control those appetites instead of allowing them to control us. And I'm not talking about self-control. I'm talking about spirit control, God control, because only he has the power for us to do this. Here's a thought for the day. Think this. I need to be controlled by Christ, not by my appetites. And here's a great prayer to pray today. God, help me today to seek you and to find your strength to keep my appetites from controlling my life. It's a good word. I pray God will bless you with that word.